Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome to this session on requisites for inclusive development for national goals. In previous sessions we had been handling a lot of aspects on inclusive development and inclusive growth. We had studied on the sustainable development, how development administration prevails. So, in this session, we would like to know what are the requisites for inclusive development for national goals. Before going into the inclusive development requisites, let's see what are the index supporting indices, the ones that can support the inclusive development, which helps us to know how the inclusive development happens also, and what kind of index prevails for us to judge whether we are on the right path. First one is Human Development Index. Human Development Index, it depends on the life expectancy and education along with the per capita income. So, second one, the Social Progress Index. This monitors the social and environmental well-being of the people. Third one is the World Happiness Index, which speaks on the generosity, freedom, and how corruption can be thwarted. So, these three indexes will help us to know about the inclusive development. When we speak about life expectancy and education along with our per capita income, yes, life expectancy is very much important. How can we deal or how can we link inclusive development to Human Development Index? Because the welfare of the humans are very much important for the growth and development of the nation. So, the life expectancy is very much necessary because this determines the human manpower, the importance of human manpower. The second one is a Social Progress Index, where only if the society is good, so will the government be good. Only when the environmental affairs are good, so will the government be good. So, the social and environmental well-being is very much necessary to determine the inclusive development. And World Happiness Index. People should be happy. We have the constitutional principles which gives them the fundamental rights. Why are the fundamental rights given to the people? So that they are not deprived of their very own rights and they stay happy in the society. So, World Happiness Index depends on your freedom for it, how you are generous enough. That's where your equitable distribution of wealth happens. We need to be generous to the needy, to the poor. So, that is very much necessary. So, World Happiness Index speaks about the freedom and generosity. So, these three have a great relation with the inclusive development. What are the conditions for inclusive development? We have been learning on inclusive development. We spoke about the development on the terms of democracy and how the amenities have to reach to all the people, including the marginalized sections of the community. So, here we have the conditions for inclusive development. First one is inclusive innovations. What do I mean by inclusive innovation? Innovation should be such that it has to reach the entire people in the country. Innovations should be affordable to all the people in the country. For example, we have the car Tata Nano. So, this nano car is affordable for every Indian in our country. So we need to see that innovations are made in such a way that it includes the entire marginalized section of the society also, and every community, every people in the country benefits by that. Second one is our educational policy. Educational policy is very important because only when you give education, so will innovation happen. And when innovation happens, you become a self-entrepreneur. So innovation policies are very much necessary. To start with, we give them a seed money and then slowly they develop, and of course through these innovation policies it has a direct effect on the gross domestic product of the country. So innovation policies are also essential for inclusive development. Then we have the information communication technology. So ICT is also necessary. Why is ICT necessary? Because that is where the government can easily approach the various departments. The time can be consumed, the work can be carried out very promptly, and it would be very efficient. It would reach the community at large. The people would be benefited without any kind of a delay. So information communication technology is very important. And today you have ample websites which help us to know the opportunities, where everybody can tap the opportunities and come forefront to do a lot of entrepreneurial activities. So this is the third condition for inclusive development. Fourth one is democratization of innovation inclusiveness. Democratization in the sense it should be easy. When a person wants to innovate, they should be given the freedom to operate that. So what lies behind this freedom? The rules and the regulations. So the licensing should also be made little comfortable for the people who are going to innovate, who are into innovation. A little amount of freedom should be given to them so that the innovation would be very good. So that's where again your education policy plays, and there you have your ICT also. Then fourth one is a long-term strategical framework. Anything, any plan that the government makes, that is what I have mentioned in the slide as LTSF, which stands for long-term strategical framework. So we need a strategy. Why do we require a strategy? Why does the country require a strategy? This is for the Sustainable Development Goals. When the Sustainable Development Goals are given by the United Nations to all the nations to be fulfilled, India should also have a long-term sustainable framework. They need to have a strategical framework to attain that sustainability. So LTSF. So what is required in the long term? We require the human capital. We require good technological facilities. We require good health facilities. So this has to be thought. For that we need to have a good financial sector. The banks should also be operative in a very good manner so that they would be helpful in carrying forward this long-term strategical framework. Then next is the medium-term strategy 1 and strategy 2. What is the strategy 1 and strategy 2? This is something related to the rural development. We need to improve, we need to develop the rural sector of the population today. Urbanization is always happening. Because of industrialization, urbanization is always happening. What happens if the rural development does not take place? The urban population would be very high, leaving behind the rural sector. So rural sector should also be taken care of. They should be given a lot of employment opportunities so that they remain in their very own place and provide us with good income and increase the growth of the country. So rural employment is very important. So these strategies, strategy 1 and strategy 2, that is rural employment 1, and then rural safety. Rural safety in the sense that their essential needs will have to be fulfilled here. So once their essential needs are fulfilled, they would always remain in the place doing their a particular employment. For example, if it's in agriculture, if it's a cottage industry in the rural areas, they have to be given the necessary infrastructure for them to carry that out. So that is a medium-term strategy 1 and 2. Again, we go with the long-term strategical framework for 2008 to 2020. Now, 2008 to 20 was a time frame when we had the Sustainable Development Goals. In the previous, we focused on the Millennium Development Goals. So, between this 2008 to 2020, this long-term strategical framework is very much necessary for us to reduce poverty, eradicate unemployment. The employment opportunities have to be given to the people. In my forthcoming slides, we would be knowing what is the status of employment in our country. So, inclusive innovations, educational policies, ICT, the democratization of innovation inclusiveness, the long-term strategical plan or framework, and then the strategies 1 and 2 all are required for an inclusive development. Inclusive development where the amenities have to reach the people irrespective of their ethnicity, the gender, etc. What is the role of inclusive development and sustainable development? Are they interlinked? Yes, they are interlinked. Let us see how they are. SDGs cannot be achieved without inclusive development. How? 1. The green growth and inclusive development, inclusive growth, have additional aspects of either concerning the environment or an economic share of the poor. So, green growth here we refer to the environmental application. So, environmental growth is also required. The depletion of forest resources, depletion of animals can also have an impact. Depletion of trees can also have a major impact in the growth. So, green growth and inclusive growth, they have an additional aspect concerning the environment or economic share of the poor, because grasslands are very much required for our country, marshlands, wetlands. So, all these places are a treasure for our country. So, that is very much important. And a portion, an economic share of the poor should also be given the necessary privileges, they should also be given the necessary benefits for them to develop. So, these two have a great impact. Second one is inclusive development puts a shadow on the validity of economic growth as it does not deliver social inclusion. So, economic growth, inclusive development is a shadow in the sense it actually, what is not covered in the economic growth is covered by the inclusive growth. Economic growth did not cover the aspect of social inclusion, whereas inclusive growth focuses on covering the social inclusion. So, social inclusion means, as I keep telling, it's a marginalized section, the vulnerability section. The vulnerable group of people should also be covered in the schemes or the policies. So, these are the two aspects where SDGs can have a major impact, where inclusive development and sustainable development have a nexus between them. Now, the Brundtland report is the report which always has given us the exact definition of sustainable development. It says that we have to keep the resources for the future meeting the needs of the present also. So, that was a beautiful definition given under the Brundtland report, and they also have focused on global sustainability. What do they say? Number one, major global environmental and development policies. This report says that it focuses on these 3 points. The first point is major global development and environmental policies. So, development policies and environmental policies are a major attribute for the country's welfare. 2, placement of environmental issues on political agenda. So, political agenda, we discuss about a lot of rules and laws. There are so many aspects. We discuss about the crimes, we discuss about the various kinds of corruption that is happening around, but we never focus on the environmental issues, because we need to focus that owing to a lot of climate changes that are happening today. So, this adaptation, mitigation, all these plans should be discussed, and that should be placed as the first in the political agenda. So, that is what is a placement of environmental issues on political agenda. Third one is the social, economic and political institutional criteria. Just with the government, we cannot achieve anything. So, here is where we need to have a citizen participation, or we should also have this engaged governance, where people should also be brought in. They should be engaged in that. Let them know, let them be aware how important this environment is for us, how important these grasslands or marshlands are important, and only by that knowledge will they protect or preserve the environment. The throwing of plastics and all that can be avoided if there is a proper engaged governance in our country. And economic and political institutional criteria. Economic is where funding is also necessary. So, we need to choose the funding agencies for us to carry forward all these aspects, so that we find an inclusive development. So, social, economic and political institutional criteria are very important. So, these 3 points are the ones which Brundtland report states. Brundtland report is very important because they are the ones who have given us the exact meaning, or what is sustainable development is being mentioned in Brundtland report once MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, were a failure. So, we need to take care of these 3 points also. Now, under the inclusiveness, we were speaking about we were actually learning about the SDGs and how this inclusiveness prevails. Now, what kind of inclusiveness can we find here? This is again categorized under 3. One is ecological inclusiveness, relational inclusiveness and the social equity. Let us see now what comes under these 3 categories. The first one is ecological inclusiveness. So, first under that is equitable sharing of the rights and risks. Can there be any person without sharing the risks? Yes, people nowadays are even fearing to take up the responsibilities because they fear risks. So, that should not be there. There should be an equitable amount of sharing of rights. People come forth to share their rights, but they are not willing to share their responsibilities because they will have to face a lot of risks. So, that should not be the situation. So, there should be an equitable sharing of rights, your responsibilities and risks. If you pollute the environment, you have to pay you have to face the penalty. If you take the responsibility of cleaning one particular place or providing good hygiene, water and sanitation, you have to take the risk. So, that is what they mean. So, equitable sharing, you have the right. Why do you have to do so? Because you have the right to life. You have the liberty to life. There is a right of life and liberty that is mentioned in our constitution. So, that is very important. It is not that we only accept our fundamental rights and say that I have the freedom to do so, do this or do that. But your right is also to keep your country's growth and development higher and increase it. So, we need to take the responsibilities here. 2, build resilience and adaptive capacity. Mitigation strategies or prevention methodologies have actually we are not able to follow those, because we can prevent, we can try to prevent. Mitigation happens once a particular situation actually completes or happens, it finishes. So, then you have to have this particular mitigation strategies. Preventive is where you know this is going to happen and so you start preventing yourself from getting into it. So here comes your resilience. Resilience is where once there is a pandemic or once a disaster happens, you have to get back to that situation. You have to get back to the normalcy where you existed. Though it would take a lot of time, resilience is one of the aspects, and there involves a lot of expenditure from the government also. The non-governmental organization, the government agencies, they both work together to bring that resilience. So this is very important. So we need to build resilience and adaptive capacity. People should learn how to face problems. So mitigation strategies are very much there. Mitigation methodologies are there. But what is the situation is, we keep adapting to the situation. We need to get adapted to the certain situations and then thrive in the society to minimize the expenditure. And of course, by doing so, we should not perform the same or repeat the same task or the same wrong task that we have been doing. For example, garbage should be segregated into degradable, biodegradable and non-degradable. Sometimes we fail to do so. That should not be the thing. We should be consistent in doing segregating that, so that that becomes easier for the waste management, solid waste management. So that is something very important. So we need to get adapted to that kind of a situation. In some places they say we should not burn the leaves or burn any garbage things within your premises. That is because it would create pollution. The air consists of a lot of gaseous emissions also. So once that should not be done, when a law is being enforced to not to be done that way, we should refrain from doing so. So that is kind of an adaptive technique that we must follow. So build resilience and adaptive capacity. Third one is green international cooperative instruments. So we have the Kyoto Protocol, the Kyoto Agreements, the G summits that we sign, the international treaties that we sign. This is to protect the environment. Environment is facing a major issue, a major depletion of our resources. So we need to be very careful. So green here refers to the environmental aspect. So green international cooperative instruments has to be taken care of, and then involve all stakeholders. Stakeholders here are just not the government. Stakeholders are the citizens, the corporate sectors, the people, the industries, the people around, the citizens of course, and then the non-governmental organizations, not-for-profit organizations. So all these stakeholders should join hands. They should join hands to bring this ecological inclusiveness. Here you may notice that we have certain interest groups. Interest groups like, if few people are from the corporate sectors, so they would join as a club. Earlier we studied something on the CLECTS, that is CLECTS, which means club plus elects. So there we spoke about the elected representatives. So here we can even think about the associations, the associations or the groups which have been created. So the corporate sectors can form as a group, the academicians can form as a group, researchers can also form as a group. So we have ample ways where we can involve all the stakeholders. So interest groups should actually volunteer to bring in that inclusive growth in our country. Next one is a relational inclusiveness. Under relational inclusiveness, we find the first point, ensure public and merit goods do not become privatized. So we need to see to that we have to abide by the governmental rules and laws. Regulations are very much necessary. So we should ensure that the public and the merit goods. What do we mean by the public goods? The essential products that should not be sold, that should not be privatized in the sense you purchase that and you sell it. So that should not happen. So there is a relational inclusiveness there. What do I mean by relational inclusiveness? Once that is coming to you, you have to accept that. Rather, you should not privatize those public goods itself. And secondly, for example, we have the railways. Railways cannot be privatized because it becomes very difficult. We have few sectors, we have some public sectors which the government holds in its hand. It does not want to privatize because transportation is where commuting of people matters. So people rely, there is a huge population that relies on commuting from one place to another, and they depend on the government transports more than the private, because private transportation is very costlier. So they do not, the railways, they do not want to hand it over to the private sector. So that is what they mean by the public goods should not be handed over for privatization. Second one, address the problems that concentrate wealth to ensure growth and development happens. So the wealth should not be stagnant at one point. It should be distributed. The wealth and income should be distributed to all the classes in the society. So how can we do that? Provide employment opportunities and rope in a lot of people. Today there are many youngsters who are without any jobs. So that is what we call as a jobless growth. That was given by Montek Singh Ahluwalia, who said there is a jobless growth, which means that job opportunities are very, very minimal. So there are people who have the very good technical skills, but they do not get into the employment. So give them the jobs, so address, and so that the wealth is not concentrated in one aspect. That is one thing. Second thing, your responsibility is to develop the other aspects of the society. So we require a good corporate social responsibility here. So distribute the wealth through providing the infrastructures to schools, institutions, and healthcare institutions, etc. So that is very much essential. 3. Ensure global rule of law and constitutionalism. We may carry out the tasks, but then we have to draw a line. We have a limitation. What is the limitation here? The limitation is the government's rules and constitutionalism. Constitutionalism is where you practice the principles of constitution. So we need to have a limitation. So the government provides us that limitation. So that is the relational inclusiveness. Third one is social equity. As the name suggests, it's a equity is we need to carry, or we need to take care of the needs of the people around. So equitable sharing of opportunities for development, knowledge inclusion for all. So knowledge is very much important. So education plays a major role. Protection of the poorest, participation of all in the developmental politics. So these four aspects are very much necessary in social equity. We need to protect the poor. We need to ensure that there is a participation of all in the developmental politics. So development is just not the duty of the ruling party. The development aspects are the duty of every single individual, let it be the opposition party or let it be the citizens who are going to vote for them. So it is the duty of all these people to participate in all the developmental politics, because development is a single entity which is for our country. So when we see these three inclusiveness, ecological inclusiveness, relational inclusiveness, social equity, these three bind together. Why do they bind together? This is to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals are becoming a serious issue because our country has to progress. We can't be in the developing stage. We are progressing, we are upgrading. India is known to be the fastest upgrading and progressive economy. So we should go ahead based on considering all these three inclusiveness. So, here in my slide you can notice 11 out of 17 goals concern social inclusions. So, you can see that 1, 2, 6, 7, 8. This includes both ecological and social inclusions. 3, 5, 10 and 16 includes the relational inclusions and social inclusions. The 11th one has ecological, social and relational inclusions. 12, 13, 14, 15 has got both relational and ecological inclusions. So, this is the Venn diagram where you can find how these two inclusions, all these three together, rule the SDGs. These are the strategies, I can say, to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals. So, 11 out of 17 goals concern social inclusiveness. Ecological inclusiveness is much lower, related to its commitment and limited eco space. So, these are the major aspects which we should consider. Well, what are the challenges? We speak about the inclusive growth, we speak about inclusive development. So, what are the challenges? We need to face those challenges also. It is only when we face the challenges we would know where we actually stand. That is why we have the performance metrics, the performance indicators which help us to identify our status or the position where we stand. So, first one is on poverty. We keep reiterating that poverty is a major issue. Yes, it is a major issue. Though we have eradicated poverty to a certain extent, after this inclusive growth, we have become pro-poor. So, here are few percentages which tell you how the poverty has been reduced. So, the multidimensional poverty index of 2018, it says that India lifted 271 million people between 2005 to 6 and 2015 to 16 with the poorest regions, groups and children. So, this particular index covers just not the particular region, but also the groups as well as the poorest regions as well as the children, reducing poverty fastest. India demonstrates the clearest pro-poor pattern of the subnational level. But despite the massive gains, 8.8% of the population still lives in severe multidimensional poverty, and 19.3% of the population are vulnerable to MDP. So, you can find these things here. 8.8% of the population still lives in severe multidimensional poverty, and the population is vulnerable to MDP. MDP is nothing but the multidimensional poverty again. So, 8.8%, that means multidimensional poverty. Multidimensional poverty is just not the poverty that is caused owing to unemployment. Poverty is also caused due to no homes, there is no availability of the shelter, no employment. So, there is many factors, health conditions, people invest so much on health. See, when sanitation facilities are not good, then it will affect the health of the people in and around that particular area. So, they would have to invest more on health, and they may lose a lot of money in investing on their health. So, that again comes under poverty. How long can they request the banks for loans to take care of their health? So many factors are there. So, multidimensional poverty, so 8.8% of the population has lives still in the multidimensional poverty, and 19.3% of the population is vulnerable. So, that is a very remarkable, I mean, it is a very surprising number. 19.3% of the population is vulnerable to this goal, because multidimensional poverty, because 19.3 they can get affected by poverty. Though because of the inclusive development, we do have a good pro-poor, and we do focus on the eradication of poverty, but still 19.3% of the population is vulnerable to it because of so many factors. So many aspects can actually hinder the poverty eradication. 2. Employment. Periodic Labour Force Survey. What does it say? The unemployment rate among the urban workforce was 7.8%, while the unemployment rate for the rural workforce was 5.3%, totaling the unemployment rate at 6.1%. Quantity and quality of employment in India are low due to illiteracy and due to over dependence on agriculture. So, we find that the urban workforce, the unemployment is 7.8, whereas unemployment in the rural workforce is 5.3%. So, the rate is much higher in urban workforce when compared to the rural workforce, because it is 7.8% and 5.3%, but then it totals up to 6.1%. So, ultimately we are in the position of 6.1% of unemployment rate. So, it is quite alarming, but yet what happens? The problem is when people depend completely on agriculture, over dependence on agriculture, and two, when there is when illiteracy is very high, right. So, quantity and quality of employment in India is very low owing to illiteracy. So, illiteracy plays a major role. So, education strategy has to be improved in our country, and people also depend on agriculture. But is it wrong to depend on agriculture? It cannot be wrong, but then owing to the environmental conditions, the farmers completely rely on agriculture. So, they need to have two different kinds of work. One can be focused, two different kinds of employment, where one can be focused on agriculture and another one they can have a cottage industry. So, they can simultaneously work on two aspects, so that they do not depend only on one and they can work on the other. There is a continuum income source from one aspect. So, that is most important. 80% of the people work in the informal sector without any social security. We find people, the labor force, moving from one place to another, especially the construction workers, and they do not have any social security. They cannot take any kind of an insurance policy or a life securing policy. So, 80% of the people who are in the informal sectors, they do not have a social security, which is very, very, very important, because they are the ones who are bringing the or increasing the growth. Without those people, the growth can never, though they are the marginalized section. That is the reason we say, for the inclusive growth and inclusive development, we require the marginalized sections of the society to be brought in. They have to come forth, and so their facilities should also be taken into consideration. Next is agricultural backwardness. Around 44% of India have agriculture related employment by GDP contribution, is only 16.5% owing to certain issues. What is the reason? One is declining per capita land availability. Now, availability of land for agriculture is actually deteriorating. You find a lot of buildings here and there. The buildings are taken, the area is taken, the land is taken by the estate owners or the real estate people who construct buildings and leave it for rent. But then what amount of income can the people who have sold the land to them get? So, once they sell it, it is a lump sum amount, but they do not know how to and where to invest that particular amount. So, land availability is becoming very scarce. We have industrialization, but at the same time agriculture being the primary sector of our country, that too has to be focused. So, technological measures will have to be adopted to secure that, and at the same time the people should also be brought into the awareness quotient that they should not depend too much on agriculture too. At the same time, they need to have another means of measures for income. Second, low labor productivity. Low labor productivity, yes, because labor is not available. We do not have the labor because people fail to move from one place to another place, fearing a lot of problems. As I said, they do not have the social security policies. They fear for health, proper shelter, and so the essential conditions for the developmental needs are not being fulfilled in certain places. So there is a low labor productivity. 3. Decline in agriculture is due to the climate changes, land degradation and unavailability of water. During this monsoon season, we have a lot of rains. The rainfall is abundant, but we fail to store that much water. That storage capacity for the reservoirs and the dams, the storage of water is very important. That is why we have the storm water management, so which is important here again. So this water has to be utilized or will be utilized for irrigation purposes. So management of water is very essential, because India is a country which has got peak summers. So there are chances where we can get into droughts also. So to avoid that, we need to have good storage facilities. And agricultural yield, there is a decline in the agricultural yield due to climate changes also, because climate is it's one of the factor that the agricultural system is completely dependent upon. If there is a variation in the climate, it hits the crops. So we do not get proper food also, so which should be taken care of. So agricultural backwardness is another problem or a challenge for inclusive development and growth. Social development issues. Here we have significant regional, social and gender disparities. So region-wise disparities also prevail, gender-wise disparities also prevail, and social disparities also prevail. So there is a gender where only this group of people should go and work, while these groups should remain at home. So that should not be the disparity. When both of them work, of course, it is good for their household as well as good for the country. And coming to the regional disparity between one region to another region, there is a lot of conflict in their interest. There is a conflict in their ideologies, their interest and their cultural behavior. So all these aspects, there is a lot of disparity which has to be taken care of. Low level and slow growth in public expenditure. So there is a slow growth in public expenditure. People are scared. People are scared of inflation. Now this pandemic has actually taught a very good lesson for the people, because they have learned how to save money. Till then people was spending it very lavishly, but once a situation arises where they do not have money in their hands, then they feel the brunt of it. So people have learned how to save. So public expenditure is actually deteriorating. So government, the people's expenditure is also deteriorating. And so what happens is, in that case, the government is also not able to spend on other facilities. So low level and slow growth in public expenditure happens. So there is a very slow growth, because people do not, they save money, they do not spend. So what happens is inflation happens. So when inflation happens, people save more and more, prices are increasing. So demand is also becoming very less, though the supply may be very high. So there's a lot of factors that can affect the expenditure. So government also goes at a very slow pace based on the people's move. So that is also one of the factor under social development issues. Malnutrition. Many children are without food. There are many rural sectors where children literally starve also. So India ranks 102 in the global hunger index. So we are somewhere. So malnutrition is a big problem. Children should be fed properly. There are children who die of hunger, and malnutrition can also happen because of any kind of infection, any kind of disease that a child faces. So that can slow their growth of the child also. So, which is one of the major factor, because children are the future of our country, and so they should be protected and taken care of very well. So, malnutrition among the children is very, very important. Community development for inclusive development. Community has to be empowered. When a community is not empowered, inclusive development does not happen. So, we had seen the challenges that are prevalent in the inclusive development. So, like poverty, agricultural backwardness. So, how can we empower the community for this particular development? So, according to WHO, community empowerment refers to the process of enabling communities to increase control over their lives. Empowerment and participation of the community, they are vital to achieve the inclusive targets. So, the WHO has clearly stated that community empowerment means the process of enabling the communities to increase a control over their lives. So, that is what is required. Control over the lives means they have to take care, they have to have a self-protection of themselves. So, self-protection is they have to take care of their very own health. So, which is very important for the progress of the country. So, WHO, World Health Organization, has mentioned that. And empowerment and participation of the country is very important to achieve the inclusive development target. As I said, this is for engaged governance. The people's participation is very much important. And the World Bank also has recognized that community empowerment is an instrument to ascertain the benefits that are availed in most efficient and cost effective way. So, whatever benefits, ultimately the government is for welfare. So, whatever the benefits reach the people, it should be cost effective also. Cost effective in the sense maximization of the gains, provided the cost is very minimal. So, they do not expect a profit, but at the same time the quality also has to be taken care. So, these are the three aspects which they say the community development is community empowerment is very important for the inclusive development. Now, how did this community empowerment begin? This is with the concept of empowerment in India began from Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Gandhiji, Nehru, who were the pioneers in this. Major challenges could be overcome by community development. One of the prerequisites of sustainable development is securing effective citizens' participation. So, the community has to be empowered. If you see in our constitution, we see that we have a socialistic secularism and fraternity. We have a lot of aspects, attributes which are being mentioned in our constitution. And we also have the directive principles of social policy, which also says, which also mentions how much the community has to be empowered, how the job has to be taken care of. There should be liberalistic, intellectualistic principles, there should be a social welfare principles. So, all these aspects are to provide the development of the people at large. So, these concepts on one side, community participation is very much important for the inclusive development. Now, let us see what are the community empowerment initiatives taken in India. First is community development program. So, community development program is where you need to uplift. As I told you, Kudumbashree is one of a self-help group which actually has uplifted the women there, women in Kerala. So, women have become quite self-reliant there. They have gained the self-confidence for any kind of employment. So, there should be a village upliftment. But where does it start? This particular village upliftment starts from the panchayat institutions. Panchayat institutions should take care of bringing measures to bring the people, the village to the forefront, introduce them to a new schemes and give them a lot of opportunities. So, village upliftment in agriculture and allied sectors communication and health is mandatory. Certain villages have their self-owned radio system where it is only about the village affairs. So, some people discuss about the issues that happen in their village through their through their radio system which they have come up with. So, that is one of an important and a beautiful innovation where everybody are aware what is happening in the village. So, that is one system. Self-Employed Women's Association, it is called as SEWA. This was a trade union comprising of self-employed women. It began in Gujarat. What was the role is to remove the middlemen. Let it be an agricultural market or any other allied sector market. There were middlemen between the wholesale and the retailers. So, wholesalers, for example, the farmers would sell the products, they would want an amount or income of 500 to 1000 per day. But what happens, the middlemen would take a major portion of the amount and give only a meager amount to the farmers, selling the rest of the products and getting money and putting into their pockets. So, that should not prevail. So, that is the reason SEWA was started, where the women wanted to remove the middlemen. So, they could directly sell the products to the customers, and so that the entire income is earned from them. So, if a product is 1000 rupees, they get the full amount of 1000 without paying anything to the middlemen. So, that is the Self-Employed Women's Association. Self-help groups, as I stated, they are the ones which help themselves. They have to bring in the empowerment measures. They have to be self-standing, self-reliant. So, there are people, there are small firms, the cottage industries which manufacture the liquid soap, the disinfectants. So, these are small scale manufacturers who are present there. So, they develop this and they sell it in the market and earn money. So, these are self-help groups. Some of them are being taught to do that, and then they become small entrepreneurs. The cottage industry develops in such a way. They help themselves financially and through their skillful activities. So, that is a self-help group measure. Community-based rehabilitation. Community-based rehabilitation is where there are the rehabilitation measures which take place when there is a disaster, when there is a hazard that is happening, when there is a risk which is being faced by the people in the society. It can be due to the disease spread, this can be due to the natural disasters or sometimes man-made disasters. So, you need a rehabilitation because many would lose their jobs in such a situation. So, rehabilitation measure is very much important. So, community, who is the first one to save or who is the first one to come forefront when a disaster happens? It is the community. Then comes the other agencies. So, community has to join together. They need to form certain groups and association to rehabilitate the entire people. So, community-based rehabilitation is another important aspect. Partnerships. This is another wonderful initiative that can be taken and that is being utilized in India. Partnerships in the field of education, in the field of midday meal schemes. So, you find Azim Premji Foundation, which has fully contributed towards education. So, they get into a lot of research and development activities. They focus only on the problems that the country faces. So, we can find a lot of researches happening in that particular foundation. So, they have contributed a lot to the education, and through the education it will reach the community as well. The community will be benefited. The problems, the issues are being taken from the community, a research is being carried out and a report is sent to the government. So, through that there is a understanding that these areas face or these regions face a major problem and the government can actually work on it. So, Azim Premji is one kind of a partnership. Another one, we have the Akshay Patra and Nandi Foundation. So, these two foundations, they actually provide the good nutritious food. They supplied nutritious food for the children in the schools. So, that is where they give them an egg, rice, dal, and the pulses of course, and then so you have a variety of food, nutritious food that is being provided to the children. So, partnership is another aspect. Hariyali is under the integrated wasteland development program. Hariyali was started to reduce effects of droughts. Here is where Hariyali is one scheme where they have started to protect the marshlands, the wetlands of our country. So, these integrated wasteland program, this is one major program which actually reduces the plans to reduce the droughts and provides for sustainable development of agricultural lands as such. So, these are the major community empowerment initiatives in India that prevails, right from community development program, self-employed women's association, self-help groups, community based rehabilitation, partnerships and Hariyali. So, all these are very much required for the inclusive development. Now, when we talk about the requisites, requisites is just being classified here into two aspects. One, what are the challenges that the country actually faces, and what are the initiatives the government actually has done. And so, what is required here is an evaluation of both. So, have we fulfilled, have we tried to reduce or the challenges that we are facing, are we successfully moving ahead in fulfilling the sustainable goals. Initiatives may be ample, but how far these initiatives are successful in bringing or moving us or pushing us forward for fulfilling that sustainable development growth and giving us a good progress. So, these are the major requisites. This is what has to be analyzed. So, in a policy, when we make a policy, if we have an inclusive development policy as such also, we have to evaluate how the schemes actually reach the people and how they benefited and do we fulfill. So, we saw a lot of challenges like agricultural backwardness, education problem, employment. So many aspects, social development, so many aspects we saw, and at the same time we also want the community participation, the movement of the people should participate, the interest groups should come forward, give volunteer, and they need to focus on the development of our country. So, that is how this particular entire lecture session has been classified into. Now, to conclude this entire session, we say that governance need to be tightened. How can the governance be tightened? It can be tightened with dedicated personnel. So, when an inclusive development happens, why should we think about or why should we focus on tightening the dedicated personnel, tightening certain aspects? We need to have dedicated personnel because we need to prevent corruption. So, that is one major aspect. Ethical training and capacity building should be provided. Ethical training, people should know about the code of conduct. What are the ethics prevalent? Ethics is one of the major things which should be inculcated in the minds of the people of our country, which is very important. So, governance has to be tightened by giving proper training. We need to have good dedicated personnel, ethical training has to be given, and capacity building. 2, all the tools available at the hands of the government must be used optimally so that the country can benefit from inclusive development. Just because we have ample resources, we should not utilize it to the extremity. We should also be judicious in utilizing the resources, and that starts from our house itself. So, if you find a fan or a light burning in the absence of any person, switch off the light and do not waste electricity. So, that is the first thing which we should always see. Do not waste water. If you find water dropping down from the tap, please close the tap. If it is not even in your house, if it is outside, it is our duty to close the tap because we should not waste water. So, these resources should not be depleted. We need to preserve these resources to a greater extent. So, use the resources very optimally so that the country can benefit from the inclusive development. And last, there is a fundamental difference between equality and inclusive development. Equality is the outcome, whereas inclusive development is a process. It's only through the inclusive development can we get into equality, where the people can be provided with equal opportunities and equal and amenities can be provided to all the sections of the community. So, these are the major requisites of inclusive development, and hence we have learnt about the conditions, the challenges which are required, which actually brings down the inclusive development, and how the community development is very important, their empowerment is important, and how we have the initiatives, how the country has taken certain initiatives towards inclusive development. So, we need to join our hands to get into that progress. Thank you so much.